Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Cheryl Jennison DeProsa, and today I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Sean Sullivan, and we're going to be discussing portable listening systems and evolving connectivity. But before we get into that, just a few items of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing sometime in about a week or two after the webinar, after today's broadcast. You can always go to shure.com/training to see this webinar and all of our past webinars. We have a lot of great topics covered there. So feel free to go to shure.com/training to see all of those archived webinars. And second of all, as we go through the webinar today, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the question pane. If you do not see the question pane, look for a dark gray toolbar with an orange box with a white arrow on it. Click on that arrow and you should be given access to the question pane. Type in as many questions as you have as we go through. We will answer them at the end of the session. So that wraps up all the boring bits. Let's get into the good stuff. Take it away, Sean.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody out there. This is of course, the Portable Listening Systems and Evolving Connectivity webinar today. We're going to discuss a little bit of Shure history from our portable listening segment and how the evolving connectivity of portable audio devices and things has changed the market over the last few years, and some of the things that Shure has done to try to keep up with all of this changing connectivity schemes to get you the best portable listening experience you can get. Again, my name is Sean Sullivan. I'm the Senior Product Manager for our Global Product Management team. My focus has been on the listening category, earphones in particular, but earphones and headphones for the last 13 years at Shure. And thank you very much for joining us today. So I will get kicked off here. A little bit of history. So Shure started making professional sound isolating earphones back in 1996 or 97. So about 20 years we've been doing this, and you can see how with our first earphone, E1, which was designed to accompany our PSM monitoring systems on stage, we needed a good sounding earphone that provided a ton of isolation, and the E1 was great. It sounded good, and it isolated well. And as you can see, if you can see the picture here in 1997, that E1, the design itself was a little bit, it left a little bit to be desired. That nice beige-colored earphone with lots of sharp corners on it. People loved it, though. It was something new and exciting, innovative. And as we realized that there was a more of a demand for this kind of thing, and for a bit more, some more options and some ways to improve it, in 2000 we launched the E5, which was our first, the first universal dual driver earphone. As you can see, that design itself got a little bit more sleek, and as the portable listening world came on, MP3 players started coming out. People started having the need for better sounding portable earphones. We started into our line and pushed a little bit more into the consumer world with our next project, our products of E2, E3, and E4. I started right about the time just after E4 was launched, and had the pleasure of being able to work on this next line that came out in 2006 through 2009. That was our SE models. And at this point, now we were starting to see phones and devices that were really the first smartphones that were combining music playing along with your phone itself. It's scary to think it was only 12 years ago that really kicked off, and now it's kind of taken over the world. But our SE line of earphones came with a modular cable design, which allowed us to add what we called the music phone adapter, MPA3C, and that allowed us to put in line this accessory that allowed you to take and receive and disconnect phone calls and talk on the phone, all within the same cable, which seems obvious these days, but back then it was kind of new and exciting. As that connectivity evolved, even back then, I mean, some of the phones had 2.5 millimeter plugs on them. Some had 3.5 millimeter plugs on them. They were switched. The pin configurations were switched, and it was really it was a gamble to buy a cable, hoping that the microphone and the buttons were going to work, depending on the phone that you had. You really had to know what you were doing. These days, of course, it's gotten much more straightforward, and we'll get to that in a little bit. In the SE, the newest SE line came out starting in 2010. We were able to introduce detachability, complete detachability from the earphone itself, using our MMCX connector design, which the MMCX design was originally in the RF world. It's a connector that's been around for many years, but was never used for an audio purpose. So Shure Engineering took on the goal of taking this very durable connector, this durable small coaxial connector, and making slight improvements on it to make it a higher quality connector that was more suitable for the audio world, to avoid any intermittency, dropouts, things like that. Another huge reason for that detachability was just that, cables break. We were selling premium earphones for $500 in some cases, and if your cable is permanently attached to these devices, they're not really serviceable. So once our 2-year warranty had run past its prime, if the cable broke, you were kind of out of luck. So we didn't want our customers to have to continue to reinvest that relatively large amount of money to replace their product when the engine part, the earphone part, was working perfectly fine. So that was a huge aspect of it. Justification for investment too. If you're going to spend now upwards of $1,000 for a set of earphones, you want to make sure that your investment is sound. Now if your cable breaks, you buy a brand new cable, and essentially you have a brand new product. What's really come on in the last few years as the benefit is connectivity. So, for a long time, 3.5 millimeter plug was the way that people plugged in headphones. I mean, for decades and decades. And we foresaw some aspect of connectivity changing in the fact that you would have additional options for connectivity. We didn't really expect that the 3.5 millimeter plug jack was really going to go away from so many of these common, most popular portable devices. But they did. Mm-hmm. And we were really lucky that we had this detachability scheme going, because now you were talking about future compatibility. Because of that detachable platform, really, no matter what connectivity thing comes next, you can buy a $1,000 earphone and know that we're going to make something that's going to be at the cutting edge of connectivity, which will always allow you to use your earphones in the way that the market is being driven toward. We like to call this whole idea connect with what connects you, right? When I was coming up, of course, in high school and such, there were these things that I'd heard of called cell phones, but that was about it. These days, I think my 6-year-old had a phone by the time he was 6. So these kids are coming up with it, and the world is really, that's how people connect with the world these days. Everybody, whether you're connecting with your media, when you're connecting with the news, or your music, of course, or your friends and family, there's always a reason to have one of these portable devices. And Shure making all of these connectivity options, that's the reason that we like to call this whole idea connect with what connects you to the world. So we've got 5 options here, and I'm going to go through some of them and the differences and why you might choose one type of connection scheme in general over another, and some of the technical differences between them. So from left to right there on the smaller boxes, the accessories, you can see that we've got our 3.5 millimeter microphone with 3-button remote, a digital lightning connector with the same microphone, 3-button remote, USB-C connection with 3-button remote and mic, and then we've got our 2 wireless connectivity options that are fairly new in the last year. I mentioned that first one, the the 3.5 millimeter plug there. It's got a switch on the back to be able to switch between whether you're using an Android device or an iOS device. That is just some simplicity. I was so excited when we were able to do that because of the past history where you needed 3 different 2.5 millimeter cables and a 3.5 millimeter cable with a 4-pin and then a different configuration of the 4-pin. Finally, there's been some more standardization across the lines where we could just provide one cable that works with both of the major platforms. But really, the whole general point of this, and to be able to understand some of it, is to know that every component in these systems is important. Those cables options that you see there, those are little systems. The earphones we've been making for years, and we're very well known for using our great acoustic and mechanical and electrical engineering teams at Shure to design some really premium earphones. But those connectivity options there really are providing you with the rest of the system. And every component is important. Now this slide here is it's my attempt at trying to make an analogy of these systems that are available and the different components that make them up, and trying to relate them to an automobile, because it seems like automobiles are more understood by the general folk. So recording quality, of course, you can never make a horrible recording sound good with a listening system. In particular, you'll actually, the better the listening system, the more you'll notice how bad of a recording something is. I look at that as the road that you're driving on. No matter how nice of a car you're driving, if you've got a horrible road, you're going to notice it. File resolution. There's been a ton of discussion about this over the last few years as file resolution has exploded. People are, went from recording and listening to MP3s, and as storage space and players got better, now we're looking at, wave files and things and bit rates and sample rates of 192 kilohertz per second, and even 384 in some cases, getting way up there. And there's always a question of where's that going to stop, and how big of a file or how high of a resolution file is really even noticeable by the human ear. We won't get into that today. But that's kind of like the interior. That's your choice. You can get your interior can get very good to the point where it's great, and then you can get really good to the point where you probably won't really feel or notice the difference anymore, but you'll know that it's there. Your source device is very important. Whether it's an iPhone or an Android device or one of these premium high-end music players or a PSM system or any of these sources, those are your controls. That's where you're deciding what you're going to listen to. You're turning up the volume. You're controlling any DSP and things like that. Industrial design, of course, the way that your system is going to look. Antenna. When you get into wireless transmission, which we're going to get into in a bit, that wireless transmission is incredibly important. Your transmitting antenna and your receiving antenna, if they are not working properly or tuned properly or designed properly, you're going to notice that as kind of like your transmission in your car. You're going to get a rough ride with some dropouts and some transmission slips if it's not done right. Moving along to codec and DAC and digital audio digital to analog conversion, digital signal processing. That's kind of like your windshields. In my opinion, it needs to be good enough to where it does not impede the quality of your music, the transmission of what you're listening to or seeing through the windshield. Power supply is incredibly important. You could have everything else in the vehicle is top notch, but if your fuel system is not clean or performing properly, it's not going to allow the rest of the parts of the car to perform to their best. Earphones and headphones, of course, something that we know very well. I look at that as like the wheels and the suspension system. That's going to give you the prolonged comfort and isolation from the road so that you can enjoy that trip for many hours at a time without needing to take a break or get uncomfortable. And perhaps the most important aspect that people tend to overlook in these small combined systems like Bluetooth devices or some of these digital cables that we're covered today is the headphone amplifier component that is on the chipset. So It's like the engine of the car, really. I mean, if you don't have an engine that is suitable for comfortably or consistently, evenly driving you up some road, up some hill, let's say, you're gonna tell. So you've driven up some hills in these mountains where your vehicle might be struggling and struggling, and you might even expect that the system's gonna overheat. But you can definitely tell, and you're not going to have that nice, consistent, smooth, easy ride. But if you have that engine in place and the rest of the system is working properly, that engine is a very key component to make sure that you're going to get the best performance out of your vehicle altogether. So it's a long, kind of convoluted analogy that I made up, but hopefully it gets the point across to some of these points. Some of the highest end digital players there are today. This is really just a thing in the last, I don't know, in the last 5-6 years, I'd say that these have started becoming more and more popular. These premium digital audio players that are dedicated to just playing audio. You've got your Hi-Fi Man, your Astelin Kearns, your Sony high-end players, and there's lots more of them that I won't mention, but these devices are designed strictly for your music, and they have huge storage capacities and allow you to listen to and store your files in any size that you decide you want to. They have nice premium headphone amplifiers in them. They have nice clean DACs and power supplies. They're very, very well designed to be able to give you the best experience you can, and they all have headphone jacks on them. So from a connectivity standpoint, just using a standard 3.5 millimeter cable with one of these systems is going to give you a great experience, and there's no doubt about that. With any of our Shure earphones or headphones, or really any of these the products on the market, they're going to sound the way they were designed to sound, whether that be excellent or just okay. You'll get the best out of your headphone or earphone by using these with a cable. Typically, they also support Bluetooth. And they typically have a myriad of different codecs that you can choose and select based on your preference. Some of them are higher density, higher file bit rates, higher transfer rates, and some of them have better wireless connectivity stability, things like that. But really, these players are some of the best around for listening, regardless of what you're pairing them to. This RMCE-UNI, the RMCE Uni as we call it, that's our 3.5 millimeter cable today that we pack with all of our earphones. That is perfect for listening to one of those premium devices in a cabled option. Of course, iOS. Mm-hmm. iOS is probably the most popular one in the States, and it's very popular other places as well. Although, of course, there are Android devices and other premium headphone players that have been becoming more and more popular over the last couple of years. iOS for a long time had the headphone jack, and it was great. And then they came out with the lightning jack, and you could use either, right? And Shure saw this opportunity as a way to improve the output. So typically Android and iOS devices, they are not dedicated music players. They are ways to connect with the world, right? They're media devices, they're email devices, they're all sorts of everything. Plus they have music. And because they're, very competitive world, mass market kind of thing, they're not necessarily always focused on audio, which means that some of the headphone amplifiers and other components in the system aren't necessarily up to driving some of the more premium headphones or earphones available. So Shure decided we would try to improve upon that, and we came out with our RMCE-LTG. Now this cable accessory is really an inline DAC amplifier. So it takes, from the lightning jack of an iOS device, it'll take the pure digital information. It'll convert it to analog through a nice Cirrus Logic DAC, and then a headphone amplifier circuit that we've designed that really gives you everything you need to drive something really difficult to drive. It's not going to struggle when it's going up the hill. So you can use 846 and 535 and all of our earphones with this, and you're really taking that digital audio out of that iOS device and putting it through a nice clean DAC and a premium headphone amplifier to get the most out of your system. It's tough though, we look at it and you see that it's a cable, and it really is so much more than that as an inline DAC amplifier with control and microphone on it. Similarly, Android. Now, Android has always been the Wild West for connectivity for a long time. We had 3.5 millimeter, which was nice and straightforward. And then when we started getting into that digital realm, for a long time, they started off allowing you to take digital audio from their USB micro B output in some models, not all models, and some models did it both ways, where you could use the telephone and the microphone to get back into the phone, and sometimes you couldn't. And that's still the case in some aspects, although we've moved on to the USB-C connection now, which is arguably a superior connection. So our USB-C cable has that same inline DAC amplifier functionality, but it'll take the digital from any Android phone with a USB-C port on it. All of them allow you to hear your music very well. If there is a headphone jack on that phone as well, there's a chance that it does not allow for telephony. But if you have a USB-C phone that strictly just has that USB-C jack and not a headphone jack, then it's a very good bet that the USB-C cable is perfect for you. And that is this RMCE USB. So the same functionality as the Lightning cable. It's got the 3-button remote on it, microphone, takes that digital audio straight out, puts it through a nice clean DAC, and a great headphone amplifier. And I'm not sure if, I don't want this to just be, of course, a commercial about Shure products. I'm really trying to avoid that, but I do want to go through the importance of some of these things so that folks know, even if you're picking out a product, whether it's Shure or otherwise, there's a lot of things to consider other than just being able to connect to something. We could have made one of those Lightning cable or inline DAC amplifiers using the same type of Lightning adapter that comes with that little dongle, that little $9 3-inch dongle that comes with all these iPhones these days. But we chose to use much higher quality components to get a better resolution out of the phone and a better amplification out of the phone. So that's why there's a big difference, and if you know the difference, then you're going to end up getting the right thing for yourself. Wow, it's been a long time, right? Admittedly, Bluetooth has been around for a while, and for many years it was looked at by audiophiles and sound nuts like me. That Bluetooth was a convenience thing and not really a high quality audio thing. And in a lot of cases, that is very true. It all depends on how it's done. And as Bluetooth evolves, it's getting better and better. The devices are getting better at sending it. The receiving devices or the listening devices are getting better at receiving it and processing it. And the world has certainly gone wireless from a listening standpoint, way more than they have in the past. Over the last 2 years, I believe that wireless is becoming much more the popular and common way for people to take in their audio. So we didn't want to be not in that business. We wanted to be in that business too. So we have our convenient Bluetooth adapter, which is our first ever Bluetooth adapter for our earphones. That is the RMCE BT1. Features Bluetooth 4.1. It's got 8-hour battery life. It uses the standard SBC codec, which means that it's compatible with any Bluetooth source. It is now packaged or bundled in some aspect with every one of our earphones. So in some cases, it's just included, whereas before it wasn't. And in some cases, it is an additional premium above a standard wired version. But we launched it, and we're known for premium high-end audio, and a lot of folks had questions about what about these great new codecs and things like that.
Yep.
And we had an answer for them, and of course, our newest that we just launched literally 3 weeks ago.
Something like that, yeah. Very soon.
October 25th. Is our RMCE BT2. This is something we're very proud of. In a nutshell, it's got Bluetooth 5, 10-hour battery life. It supports the aptX codecs, like aptX HD, aptX low latency, along with the standard AAC and SBC codecs. But really the key here is it features a premium headphone amplifier, which is one of the things that has been overlooked in a lot of the Bluetooth devices. I'll go back to that car analogy. The DAC and the high resolution files have been talked about and promoted by a lot of the companies that make those chips and files for years. So everybody's pretty much aware, of the details of the benefits of a high resolution file. Whereas that and the codecs, the companies that make the codecs, they will market and advertise the fact that those codecs are out, like aptX HD or AAC or LDAC or any of these codecs that are out there. The consumer that's buying these high-end products, they're familiar with them because they've been advertised. And they do make a difference. They definitely make a difference, and it's great to see them going that way. When it comes to the engine, the headphone amplifier component, there isn't anybody really touting the fact that they're designing a better marketable headphone amplifier, because these things they've always been there. They've always been this component that's on a board that is the last step before your headphones. And it's just kind of assumed that they are what they are, and that's not the case. We looked at a lot of our competitive set in the Bluetooth world and tried to determine what it is exactly that makes one of them better than another one. And when you get into the codecs, we're pretty much the same across the board as long as you've got your premium codecs like your aptXs and your LDACs. And that's going to perform as well as your antenna design, right? As allows you, because nobody wants dropouts. I think they'd prefer a nice stable connection over a slightly better codec. However, when it came to really actually noticeable performance, the headphone amplifier in most of these was lacking. The RMCE BT2 has a nice premium headphone amplifier that really does a great job of staying linear when driving, even a very difficult earphone to drive like the SE846, which has got a very low impedance. And when it's driven by an amplifier that's not quite sufficient, it really changes the way that earphone sounds. With the RMCE BT2, finally, I think there's a Bluetooth device available that is worth listening to with the 846. All right, I'll get off of my Shure advertisement here. You can see here's a little bit of the general idea, and this is not just us, but this is this top picture here, diagram here, shows a typical Bluetooth circuit, and this is why I would say that even these little Bluetooth devices that you're considering buying, they've got a ton of components. They are a system. There's more components in here than there are in your, typically in the output of your source. You got your antenna for input. You've got a Bluetooth receiver that decodes those codecs, the transmitter. So your phone and your Bluetooth receiver, in order to use special codecs, they both have to be compatible with those codecs. For instance, iOS uses AAC and SBC, and that's it at this point. So even if you had a receiver that supported 100 other codecs, you would still only be using SBC or AAC because that's what iOS supports. When you get into Android, they just became compatible with Oreo, one of these last releases maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and that update that they put out now includes aptX and aptX HD. So these Android devices have a bit more, and you can get LDAC on some of them. Anyway, some of these other codecs. But if your receiver device isn't compatible with those codecs, then you're just going to be using SBC or AAC anyway, which are both fine codecs to use. And honestly, the headphone amplifier benefit is going to outweigh whether you're listening to SBC or aptX HD. But you can see here in that bottom diagram, the whole idea there is that rather than using the little headphone amplifier that's part of the chipset, that's an afterthought, kind of the last thing that goes in the line, we have bypassed that completely. Instead, we put a premium headphone amplifier that's capable of driving earphones with lower noise, lower distortion, and a more stable frequency response. All these things are very important to make your car, to make your drive as good of a performance as you can be. Now, I'm wondering if there's any questions out there. I can ramble on about earphone technology and connectivity for hours on end, but I'd rather field some questions if possible.
Sure, we've got a couple, so
Awesome.
here we go.
All right.
Okay, so question about the RMCE LTG remote. This person was viewing it on Amazon and saw that it had some below average reviews. Do you have anything to say about that, or what? Can you speak to that at all?
Absolutely. We put out the RMCE LTG, and anytime you have a Lightning device, there's going to be some possible issues once you have firmware updates to the iOS system. Audio devices sometimes will perform not the way they're supposed to perform until Apple will throw an update to that new operating system or that new firmware update, and typically they get fixed. Sometimes that can take a couple weeks. I'm not putting this on Apple at all. We also noticed that our microphone in particular was not quite performing up to par. So we have made updates and improvements to the LTG since it has launched. And if anybody has any of this RMCE LTG that they feel is not giving them the best performance, I recommend getting it returned and replaced. Shure has a 2-year warranty, and we do everything we can to make sure that our customer service takes care of anybody that's not satisfied with one of our products.
And you can always go to shure.com/service. That's www.shure.com/service to get in touch with our service team, and they can help you out with that.
Absolutely. The latest version that we sent out there is that with the same timing as we came out with this new packaging. Let me see if I can get back to it here. This brightly colored packaging that's now on the market. That's the same time as we updated our LTG with the latest update. But they are really performing very well, and I recommend anybody that has any issues with it to please contact the service.
Great. Okay. Next question. Can you talk about the thought process to why the LDAC codec was left out of the RMCE BT1?
Yeah, LDAC and aptX HD were both left out of the RMCE BT1. As much as we wanted to make sure that we provided a premium experience at that time, we wanted to make sure that we got a solid, great functioning RMCE BT1, if you will, out there to give the convenience that it deserved. A lot of folks like yourself just asking there, why didn't we include some of these higher end codecs? It was our first shot out of the gate, and we knew also that we were going to have RMCE BT2 coming along that was going to fill that more premium kind of listening need. So we look at the RMCE BT1. It's got SBC, which is compatible with again with every source on the market, and we wanted to make sure we did that one and got it out there, nice solid RF performance and music reproduction, knowing that the BT2 was coming, that it would add all these aptX HD and things like that. We didn't put LDAC in the RMCE BT2, but we do have aptX HD, aptX low latency, and all of those things. I'm sure that, as we go on, we're not going to stop manufacturing Bluetooth devices at any time in the future. And as we go, we will continue to update with the latest and greatest codecs and things like that. those seems like there's a new one every 6 months, and our development cycle, of course, is longer than that. But we'll always try to make sure that we have a version of connectivity with the latest and greatest codecs. So I would assume that in the future we'll probably have something with LDAC or Bobcat or whatever the newest, latest Bluetooth codec is.
We're always working. We're always
Absolutely.
working to keep our products in line with modern technologies.
Exactly.
All right, next question. Is the RMCE and same question, RMCE, LTG and USB, are they tuned for Shure's house sound, or is it a rule flat frequency response, same as the lightning output in the iOS device?
Very good question. Those two devices, those two inline DAC amps, their goal is to take the output of those, Android or iOS, and put them through our clean DAC and our headphone amplifier without changing anything. We want the cleanest, most accurate representation of the music. When it gets to the earphones, we don't want to have shaped anything. The earphones themselves have tunings and sound different across the board with that Shure sound. Our goal with those inline DAC amps is to provide as clean and pure of a nice, strong signal so that the earphones can do their job. We definitely don't want to color anything on the way through that inline DAC amp.
All right. Question sort of just about the earphones. Which model in the SE lineup has the most flat frequency response?
Good question. This question comes up a lot. Now, we should start with what flat means. In the engineering world, flat means something completely different than it does in the listening world. In the engineering world, flat, if you heard something that was engineering flat, like accurate measurement type flat, you wouldn't like the way it sounded. That would mean your frequency response was literally flat across the entire frequency response, and your ears are tuned differently than that. Your ears are more sensitive to certain frequencies than they are to others by a great deal. So when I consider flat from a listening standpoint, I look at something that is taking what's sent to it and reproducing it without adding any low frequency, without adding any extra brightness. And in that aspect, I would say currently our SE 425 is probably what I would call our most honest sounding earphone, in that what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And some people like that. Some people are looking for that accuracy. Some people would prefer it, particularly in today's world, flat out. Some people prefer a little bit more low end than what a flat or really truly balanced earphone sounds like. But for those that are looking for that really honest reproduction, I would say the 425.
Okay, great. So a question about BT1 cables. This person is with a distributor, and they have some people that are having issues when they're pairing BT1s to multiple devices. Of course, not using at the same time, but paired with multiple devices. Mm-hmm. And they say that after a few pairings, they become unusable. How many devices can you pair a BT1 with, realistically?
I believe the paired device list, or the PDL, will store up to 8 devices. Meaning that, of course, you can't be using 8 devices at a time. It can use 2 at a time. And there is a hierarchy there, that the first one, depending on the type of device, whether it be a headset or just a listening device, there's a hierarchy there to where the first device that's connected will take precedence over the second device. If the second device has a phone call in it, then when a phone comes in, it'll cut off the first device and go to the phone call, or vice versa. The trouble that you do get into in some of these is not, and it's not just with RMCE BT1, is that now you're connecting to usually different devices with different brands and operating systems and hardware setups. So they don't always act the same. Mm-hmm. If I had to come up with a list of multiple devices connected, and in every combination I could, there would be tens of thousands of combinations, and not all machines are created equal. So I recommend to anybody that's having trouble, if they've paired a ton of devices and now they're having some connectivity issues, to plug your BT1 into the charger, make sure that it is powered off, and then press and hold your center button on the 3-button remote for about 15 to 20 seconds, and that'll reset it. Now what's going to happen is when you're from an off position and you're plugged into power, you press that center button, hold it down. What it's going to do is it's going to turn on, it's going to go into Bluetooth pairing mode, it's going to go a few more seconds, and then it will turn off again. Once that device turns off again, or once your cable turns off again, that PDL, that paired device list, is cleared. So you're basically factory reset, and you should be able to start over and pair it with any devices that you need to pair to.
And I can say that a lot of connection issues, if you're having a lot of dropouts or stuff like that, a lot of times a good old-fashioned factory reset can solve a lot of problems. So I would say if you have people that are having connectivity issues or whatever, do a reset and see if that gets you back to square one. And if not, then get service involved.
That's a great one, yep.
Okay, great. Next question. When will your SE earphones be updated to include the new BT2 accessory?
Wow, good question. I'm not certain which earphones, or if any, will actually be included or will be bundled, if you will, with BT2. Right now, BT2 is available as a premium accessory. So BT1 is available and essentially included as an option for all of our earphones. But the BT2 currently is
standalone.
Yeah,
accessory.
it's a standalone. What we don't want to have happen is if we then included BT2 or an option with BT2 in all of our products, now we would have 45 different product configurations in every market around the world, and some of them would have BT1, some would have BT2, and some would have the uni cable. They would have different colors of all over the place. So for right now, at least, and as far as I can see, that BT2 will be a separate accessory.
All right, good to know. So speaking of that, what is the retail price of the BT2?
The BT2 sells for $149 US.
If you're not in the U.S., you can contact a local authorized dealer to get pricing in your region. You can always go to our website, Shure.com, find your region, click the Where to Buy link, find a local dealer, and they can tell you pricing in your local currency. Cool. All right. Next question. Doesn't reference exactly, but I'm guessing that it's in regards to the BT1 and or BT2 or any of the accessory cables. How do they work with the Shure SE215 that the person is currently using?
The Shure SE215, in my opinion, is it is the workhorse. It is what I would call the industry standard of the earphone world. It can do everything well. It's not a specialist, but it does well. It's fairly easy to drive. That said, you will definitely notice a difference and a benefit between, let's say, a BT1 and a BT2, or a lightning cable and a 3.5 millimeter cable. Although I'd say it's very easily driven by a 3.5 millimeter cable, depending, as long as your headphone amplifier or other circuitry in whichever device you're using is up to par. But if you're using an iOS or an Android device, if you lost your headphone jack, then either USB-C or LTG cable is definitely the way to go. The BT1 drives an SE215 really well. The BT2 obviously has its benefits even with an SE215, but yeah, I'd say the 215 is compatible with just about anything, and you're going to get out of it what you put into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it really all just depends on what you're looking for in your listening experience and how sophisticated, quote unquote, your ears are.
Exactly. Yeah. And some people want a really simple system, and some people are willing to go and put extra, components in their system, and they're really looking for a customized performance. But with the SE215, I mean, it's just a wonderful little earphone at $99. You might argue that buying a BT2 for an SE215 seems strange because you're putting $150 accessory on a $100 earphone. And I can totally see that argument. Yeah, that's true.
I have used the SC215s with the BT1, and I think they sound great. I've used the 846s with the BT2. Those sound really great,
Yeah, it's
but
amazing.
it's kind of just different levels of great and how much your discerning ear is looking for.
Good point. Nicely said.
All right. Next question. On the cable accessories, what is the best way to use the mic to have a clean and clear conversation? Do you put the mic as close to your mouth as possible? Do you let the cable dangle? And then also, does the iPhone's noise canceling work with the cable, or is it bypassed?
No, the iPhone's noise cancellation will not work with a cable. Never has. It won't. This is because there's a proximity necessary, an algorithm that determines exactly where the microphone on the phone, the handheld phone is. And that's how they get their noise canceling when you're talking on the phone. Anytime you plug a cable in to it, it will bypass that other microphone. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work the way it is because the distances between the microphones. What was the first part of that?
So talking about sort of using the cable on the phone, and is it better to hold the mic to get the best signal, the best
Sure.
thing clear?
This I always put to there's a bit of common sense here. In a fairly quiet environment, that cable dangling, just hanging from your ear down by your chin, is going to do great. It's going to be wonderful. If you're walking through, if you're at a NASCAR event or something that's very loud, then there's a chance that the noise floor around you is so high that you're going to need to try to overcome that. And in certain situations, you'll want to, bring that mic closer to your mouth. But for most of the time, and the great majority of the time, letting it hang down by your chin is just fine, and that's where it's really designed to be used.
Great. Okay, question about the BT2 cable. Is it firmware upgradable, say if new codecs came out, or is it all in the hardware?
It is hardware dependent. Okay. So there are some aspects of that system in the BT2 that could be updated if necessary, but we don't foresee having any feature updates like codecs or other features that would be a firmware update. Any of the new codecs or any additional codecs that come out, typically they're going to require a different chipset altogether. That would be nice, though. I would love to be able to just firmware update and get all sorts of new codecs and features, but unfortunately that's not the way these chip manufacturers work.
Great. Okay. So to clarify, the 3.5 millimeter cable does not have the premium amplifier in it, correct?
Correct. The 3.5 millimeter cable uses the amplifier that's built into the headphone jack of the phone. So you are using whatever is built into your device.
Great. Okay, and then the last question I've got here, this one might be a little tricky for us to answer, but it says on Amazon there are some listings listed as international version and some listings that cost more. Is there a difference between the normal and the international versions?
Not anymore. At some point, and they're really, the differences between the international version back in the day, years ago, was we might have done a special edition color of an earphone that was only available in Japan or China or anywhere really. Just like we also did special editions that were only available in the States. Now, these days, the global market is the same across the board. So unless it's some special color that was discontinued or is no longer available somewhere, all the current stuff that's not discontinued is available in all markets. There are some things on Amazon that might cost more, things like that, because they pair them. So you'll have to pay attention. Sometimes it's not just an SE846, let's say, but it's an SE846 and an LTG cable or something like that, in which case, a 215 with the RMCE BT1 or some facet of that. And there they may be charging more money because it's actually more than one product being sold. But no, across the world, our global market is in unity at this point.
Fantastic. All right, I've got one last question that we can kind of wrap up the day with, something that we haven't really talked about, but something I know that is very near and dear to your heart. Can you talk a little bit about the new KSE 1200 system?
Ooh, yeah.
I knew you'd like that
I
one.
love that. Absolutely. I think I might even have some stuff down here. So the KSE 1200, for those of you that are not familiar with by the model number there, the KSE 1200 is our newest version of our electrostatic earphone system. We launched the KSE 1500 about 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And it was a big hit on the market. Great. It was the first time that anybody had miniaturized electrostatic technology into an earphone. Finally portable. Electrostatic systems have been around for decades. Maybe the technology has been around for about 100 years. But it's always been available in the market as a floor-standing speaker or an over-the-ear headphone that required a large amplifier that was plugged into the wall. Therefore, it was never really portable. However, our engineers figured out a way to make it portable. And in today's portable market, where your files and your devices are really just super high-end and great quality, there's finally a reason to have a portable electrostatic system. Electrostatic technology, if you're not aware, is known as the cleanest, most accurate representation of a transducer, or the cleanest, most accurate transducer available. And this is in large part due to the diaphragm itself. So the diaphragm on a electrostatic driver system weighs essentially nothing. It is a very thin sheet of mylar, thin mylar, that has a conductive coating on it. And that is placed in between two high voltage charged stator plates with the audio signal on it. And those plates are not quite touching each other, just spaced apart a little bit. And in between those plates, because they're high voltage charged on them, it creates this powerful electrostatic field between them. And a diaphragm that weighs next to nothing is suspended between those plates. And as the music signal or the audio signal changes, that electrostatic field modulates, which moves that diaphragm. So the diaphragm is moving as fast as the electrostatic field around it, which is, I'm not sure, I don't like to say the speed of light, but man, it moves as fast as that electrostatic field modulates. And really the result there is the fastest transient response available, the most accurate correlation to source material. So incredibly accurate, incredibly detailed. And that first system that came out had a DAC built into it. The KSE 1500 had a DAC that went at 2496 ADC and DAC. Had a 4-band parametric EQ in it, a graphic user interface, and it was compatible with just about any of today's digital devices. We saw a lot of people using this in the field that were using it with these premium players that I talked to a bit about before, that really already have a really nice DAC and file system in them. They have great DSP available for them. They've got a nice parametric EQ or a nice EQ available. And they didn't really need all of the digital stuff on the front end of the KSE 1500. And this system went for $3,000 with the earphones. So we saw another opportunity to cost reduce that system, or the availability of electrostatic earphones. We made the KSE 1200, which is just a pure analog version of the KSE 1500. The same exact earphones, but now that amplifier is only analog. So we took out the user interface. So there's no DAC in it anymore. There's no DSP. And we were able to bring that cost down to a $2,000 system now instead of a $3,000 system. It's been doing very well, and I think it was a smart move because of the evolution of today's players to where they didn't really need all those extra bells and whistles. They just wanted that great electrostatic amplification and transducer.
Great. All right. So they are still both available. The KSE 1500 and the KSE 1200 are available.
Yep. And I'd say, if you were using an iPhone or an Android device for your source, then perhaps you're better off with that DAC in the KSE 1500. If you've got one of these premium players, or if your source is really truly clean and up to premium audio grade, then the KSE 1200 is going to do you great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that about wraps up our time today. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you learned a lot. I know I sure did. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, or any questions that pop into your head about earphones or listening devices or anything else that we make, you can always send it to support@shure.com. And our team of applications engineers, who are a bunch of smart guys and gals, can answer just about anything you've got. So that's support@shure.com. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and we will hope to see you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.